Bem-vindos, bem-vindas a mais um episódio do Dhub Talks. Estamos aqui hoje para mais um episódio que será conduzido em inglês, recebendo os fundadores da Resol-VR, Dan e JP. Vou passar para o inglês agora para conseguir conversar com os nossos entrevistados de hoje. E Dan and JP, welcome to the Hub. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. And to start introductions, I would like first to ask JP to introduce yourself and let our audience know who are you and why are you with Resol-VR?
Okay, perfect. Yes. I'm JP Rossi. I'm a lawyer. I have a master in technology law. My story with Resol-VR, it began when I decided to focus on, first after my master, I decided to focus on legal design. So I made some contacts with a lot of people on the legal design community, environment, and I found that Tess Manuelo from Legal Creatives, it would be a good choice to me to make my trainings and and start to work on the legal design field, because I feel so comfortable with the human-centered position about legal design. So I went to the academy. I started to make the trainings. As a matter of fact, this is the third year I continue with her. Hi, Tessa. I consider her my mentor. I like so much her and her academy, so it's incredible. And then I started to found my agency in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. Why? Oh, this is interesting. Because Argentina has not a good develop in legal design. So, as I saw that in all Europe and America, legal design is more developed and there is more agencies and law firms are taking legal design, I said, okay, I have to work, because I'm from Argentina, living in the Netherlands. I said, okay, I have to develop in my country an agency to start with this. So 2 years ago, I decided to make an agency, Accessible Legal Design, it's called. It's inside of a law firm, Studio Frias, where I'm the director of innovation and technology, as advised the law firms in innovation and technology and digital technology. And then I said, okay, we can make another thing in innovation. We can create an agency of legal design. And they say, why? But this is not legal design right now in Argentina. And I say, okay, I think we can do step by step a path. We can start, and then it's coming. It's always coming, because the development in Europe is now so quickly that we can make more and more, perhaps, contacts with some legal design agencies in Europe to train our people in Argentina. So that's what I decided. To be short, okay. After that, I met Dan in some legal designs conference and seminars, and like a year ago, we started to work together to develop some project. This project specifically Resol-VR, that I was appointed CEO of the company, because my background was in law and it was as an entrepreneur. I was former CEO of another startup. So I used to work with startups in South America. I work in Buenos Aires, Rio, and Miami. It was based our former startup. So it was nice to work with Dan. He's I consider a star in this field.
Well, that brings us to you then, but don't let me forget that I also want to have a discussion just on legal design and this global perspective that you both have. But then, moving on to you, who are you and why are you resolving stuff?
Dan Riley. I'm the founder of a company called Spearhead Interactive, initially. So that was developed on the back of 4.5 years in academia. I graduated with a degree in 3D animation and visual effects from Teesside University in the northeast of England in the UK. And I spent 4.5 years in a research lab in the virtual worlds industry. This is from 2007 to 2011. I did the whole academic thing. Wrote research papers, spoke at international conferences, evaluated about 300 different virtual worlds platforms.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, and we launched the world's first virtual world search engine as well, which is now defunct, but it was a really cool project. And we were just looking at the ways in which we could solve commercial business challenges using online and real-time 3D environments. So everybody's kind of metaverse is kind of now. We were doing that in 2007 and before as well, with platforms like Second Life and these sorts of things as well, which some of your listeners might be familiar with. So the largest project we worked on within academia, within D-Lab, which is obviously Dhub, so delighted to be here. It feels like I've almost come full circle, if I'm honest. But so it was a 16 square kilometer virtual business park. Room for 9,000 businesses to rent a virtual plot of land, establish a presence, communicate, collaborate, connect supply chains, showcase products, exhibition centers. We actually think we were the first people ever to live stream into a virtual environment. So we launched the virtual environment in the real world and had an audience of people for the presentation, but we live streamed the video feed into the virtual world for avatars all over the world to sit in the exhibition center and watch the launch live. So that was just an incredible experience. So that was from 2007 to 11. I ultimately got made redundant from that position, launching a metaverse in the middle of a global recession when nobody knows what it is now, let alone 15 years ago. It is what it is. So I set Spearhead Interactive up in 2013, and the company visualizes processes and we visualize data. There was no VR or AR industry at that point, so we were developing PC applications and mobile apps. And we started the business by developing around about 8 to 10 different demos to prove different applications of the technology to different markets. So we did things like operational manuals for things like 3-pin plugs to show how electricity flows from devices and how you could maybe use that from a product development perspective, or rapid prototyping or something without having created a physical prototype. Fast-moving consumer goods and polling systems as well, so consumers can choose which digital model they like best, and that obviously there's no raw material cost, there's no manufacturing for the actual design. And we were doing things like assembly guides for flat pack furniture, BIM tools for construction, making walls semi-transparent to visualize the infrastructure. So with the academic background, we think we have a solid amount of intellectual capital that's way above and beyond the current understanding within the markets. And that's power and testament to the work that we've done and the opportunities that we've been given through our customers over the last 11 years. So ultimately, Spearhead has grown. We invested in over 100 pieces of hardware over the years as well. So the VR industry kind of landed probably about 8 to 9 months after we set the business up. So any technology that we can leverage in order to improve the output that we provide to our customers, we'll invest in. Typically prosumer technologies rather than anything $250,000 or whatever. We want it to be affordable and accessible for our customers as well. So we've now done over 150 projects for customers in over 30 sectors in Europe, Asia, and South America since we first set the business up. And as we do either a transformative project or we have a number of projects within a specific sector and field, we'll then spin out essentially a pre-seed satellite startup, of which there are currently 3, and we're hoping to have another 2 online in the next 18 months.
Great stuff.
So some of them are productized. So we have a sensory room for kids with autism and other neurological conditions, which is an Android-based mobile app that's entirely free of charge, safespacevr.com. If it helps anybody out, amazing. And that's works in 360 mode and also in virtual reality through a cardboard headset.
We'll leave the link in the description for people to try it out.
Perfect. That's great. Anything we can do that supports people going forward is amazing. So we're quite a philanthropic company as well. We'll reinvest our revenues in ways that we can support other people. For example, we also did a patient intubation experience for COVID as well. So we tried to get funding to develop a virtual reality training tool to teach doctors and nurses how to intubate patients. Ultimately unsuccessful. So any periods of downtime we have as a team, we're always looking at ways in which we can leverage our expertise to provide extra value to society as well. Safe Space is one. And then in 2018, I originally launched Resol-VR. And it's essentially an innovation and technology partner for the legal industry, specifically working with lawyers, law enforcement, and insurance sectors. So we had a case, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later on, that provided the catalyst for us to look at this in terms of developing it into an actual business. The other startup we have is Buildware, which is essentially the same thing as Resol-VR, but targeted at property and construction as well. And the next 2 we're looking to spin out within healthcare and then the energy sectors as well. So what we do is very it's the same process that we go through with all of our clients: consultative activities, rapid prototyping, development work, and then any kind of hardware supply support. We're platform and technology agnostic, so it's really what's the best tool for the job that's going to support the end user. It's always about how we can deliver not just a return on investment, but a return on experience. If we can turn a mundane task into a compelling activity for somebody, dare I use the F word, fun, when it comes to work, then you get natural efficiency and productivity benefits as a result of that. And we've got some really good examples of that too. So we visualize process, we visualize data, and we specialize in immersive and interactive 3D software.
It's fun that you mentioned that to make tasks more engaging, because we just had a workshop, I think 2 weeks ago here at the Hub in partnership with Clock Brazil, which is the Legal Operations Consortium, Brazil edition. And we had a session here where one of the speakers mentioned current research on why people are disengaged at work, and there are a few reasons to it. Surprisingly, one of them being just demotivation to do a task. And I don't see any growth room. I don't see perspective or ways to do it differently. So it's interesting that you've noticed that as well already, and that you're working towards making that into something that might be, well, as you said, fun.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it is that we have all of this intellectual capital and expertise in how we can transform processes in order to improve them for all sorts of different companies and things around the world. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an architect, a subsea engineer, or any of the other things that we've worked on over the last 11 years. So it's about collaboration. And the biggest challenge I think society has at the moment is that too many people are siloed, and there's so much expertise that's siloed as well. Whereas if we can take this expertise over here that we have and the expertise that maybe the legal industry has, and we can smash it together, because at the minute it's just a thin sliver, and then what we want to do is just rise everything up together. And that's really the way that we approach business. I'm less interested in a client-supplier relationship and more interested in how we become a digital transformation partner.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And this engagement necessity, is that something you felt in your legal design journey, let's put it that way, JP? Because you went searching for Tessa and a mentor and legal design. So did you also feel that being a lawyer was getting too boring and too demotivating for you to continue?
Yes, all my life. You're right. That's why I made a lot of things. I work on sustainability. I have a partnership here with Visão Sustentável. It was a based Sao Paulo company that works in corporate social responsibility too. I worked like 10 years on this. First, because my background, first of all, I started to work as a lawyer to NGOs. So I always have a commitment with the social impacts and with the help people, help organizations to
inclusion.
Yes, that's my background. So what happened after my first approach to that NGOs, I start to work on the project management, because I say, okay, I can make more than advise you on tax, on legal, on something. I can say, okay, work on your project management and getting funds, raising funds for you, manage the program, project, etc. So at that time, I say, okay, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. What am I? So it was like a
what am I? Who am I?
The midlife crisis kicked in.
And then when I joined the last startup, I was the CEO. It was on tourism, nothing else. But I managed of the legal. So I managed all the contracts, all the legal things. So that's more my legal approach to that startup. But then I say, okay, I made an exit. Okay, great, I have an exit. So I have to say, what's my next? What's next? And I say, okay, I like law and I like technology. Okay, I had to make a master in law and technology. So I went to university again, made a master at Vrije University Amsterdam, and then I start my path on this. And say, after my master, I say I have to focus on legal design because I want to help and improve the human-centered position of everything. And for me, working with him is like the legal design 2.0, something like this. Is okay, we are in another step because we are visualization. We visualize process, and this process is like legal design. We were at Legal Design Summit in Helsinki, in Finland, launching this, And it was incredible. He was a speaker, and 600 lawyers, all the people there, was astonished about, wow, that is great. So for us, it was like, okay, recognition of our work. And then we are here at Web Summit. We were chosen by the Web Summit to Alpha Startup Program. So we start a project here. We are going to make some connections. We are very delighted to stay with you because we want to make real partnership with you. We want to work, as Dan said, together to get no plus, more is X.
Exactly.
To divide is to multiply, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Correct.
But it's interesting that you mentioned your multidisciplinary path, and that kind of brings me up to what Dan spoke about. We've been working into silos, and I see at times lawyers, especially young lawyers or young practitioners, being very concerned about AI replacing us with work. And my personal view is that hyper specialists are assumed to be easily replaced. I mean, it's not like a year or so. We're speaking still a few decades, because that's repetitive tasks are the easiest for a machine to learn and just repeat, though we could have an entire different conversation about it. But just to bring us back to the multidisciplinary path, it is something that I personally strongly believe in, and not only because it will be profitable in the future and a way to hold a job, but also because it's the most creative path. And I mean, you're perfect examples of it. So many different companies and businesses, and they're just arising out of different expertises and clients and cases. And if you were just narrowing your view to like, this is not what I do, so I'm not even going to look into it, you would spare yourself the opportunity to be working with something that could be great.
Absolutely.
But talking about great work, let's hear that case about Resol-VR. So how did Resol-VR start? If you can just give our viewers a little intro about what Resol-VR does. And I am personally very curious to know, why working with lawyers? We know lawyers, JP and I, we're sure of it. We're a very difficult bunch to work with, especially in the innovative sector. Particularly with VR. I feel like lawyers are the most skeptical about it because many of the things we do require, or at least we think they do require, that personal touch to it. So let me hear about the case, the challenges, and what brought you to Resol-VR.
Okay, perfect. Dan.
Okay.
Please. I'm talking later about the new projects and products.
Perfect.
But I like that Dan is going to explain perfectly. Yes, our
no pressure.
Visualization for litigation. That's our case. We are going to present right now Dan Riley talking about visualization for litigation case.
Great. So we were approached by a forensic investigator in 2016. So we're going back a little while. He was working on a case. I'm working through what I can and what I can't say regarding the case. As you know, from a legal perspective.
So many NDAs, so many sensitive information.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it was a fatal road traffic collision in Scotland. So it was involving a supermarket delivery van and a tanker truck that was carrying 19,000 litres of aviation fuel to a local airport. Essentially, the delivery driver had taken a wrong turn and slowing down to stop whilst he went into the correct driveway. So the tanker driver behind him decided to do an overtaking maneuver. As the supermarket van turned, obviously caused a minor collision. That spun the delivery van in the middle of the road. Driver was shaken but unhurt, but unfortunately the tanker driver destroyed a lot of hedging, went into a ditch, hit a polished driveway, took the top of the cab off, and ultimately caused fatal injuries to the driver. As Murphy's Law would have it as well, the load detached, and a local resident had been cutting down trees a couple of weeks before in his garden, so that punctured the outer casing of the tanker and spilled majority of the aviation fuel into both the garden and the local watercourse, so a significant environmental disaster.
Yeah.
So I was approached after this case had been the criminal case had been settled. It was a no-fault verdict for the driver of the van. And we were approached by the forensic investigator to assist with the civil case. The civil case was originally developed by the tanker owner, and there was a separate civil case with the family of the deceased driver as well. So we used the laser scan data from the police force. We use satellite data to create the accurate ground terrain. The forensic investigator provided us with all the black box data recorder information for the vehicles, so we knew where they were going, how fast they were traveling, these kinds of things. And I also rang the Met Office, the local weather service in the UK, to visualize the sun position and also the wind speed, if there was any other variable factors. We operate Resol-VR as a completely impartial service when we're developing our visualization for litigation services. It's about attaining the evidence from both parties, prosecution and defense, and essentially just bringing what happened to life to the best of our ability based on the knowledge that we've got. The functionality that we applied, because we run everything in real time, essentially we're using games engine technology. So we develop the environments in 3D, but rather than developing functionality to provide entertainment, we're using it to solve commercial business challenges. And we're outputting to a number of different technologies. We recognize that VR isn't often the best thing for the best job. It just so happens that I almost feel like the industry skipped PC and mobile devices for 3D visualization and interactive technologies, mainly because of the excitement that came around from VR. It was a technology that was, 70s, 80s, and 90s, very clunky, very R&D focused, very specialist. But then all of a sudden it was able to become mainstream through, again, the development of processing power and having extra bandwidth and these sorts of things. So we developed two versions of the software. We developed a PC version so that people could look around a screen and see exactly what happened and communicate. The functionality, we also did the virtual reality version for a much more immersive experience. The functionality we put in a number of camera positions, so you could move around the scene freely to move and go wherever you want. But we also can put you in the driver's seat of both vehicles.
Oh, nice.
And we also had the reflections in the wing mirrors and things like that, so you could assess everything that the people were seeing. The models of the vehicles were accurate to their real-world specifications. We even animated the wheels at the correct speed based on the tachograph data as well. We also put in the witness positions, so we can actually validate and invalidate the statements based on what they said they saw versus what we can see that they saw through the visualization.
Interesting.
And because this has been going on for 3 years, like I said, obviously things can change, memories are shifted. It's not that somebody's maybe not telling the truth, it's just that things have changed over time. So we also put in player controls, so you could play, pause, rewind, fast forward, all of those kinds of things too. Long story short, we were all prepared to go to court. We provided a statement of everything that we'd done, and that was assessed by the defense teams. Obviously, we believe this was the first time 3D visualization and virtual reality was used to solve a real-world court case back in 2018, first in the world. So naturally, people were going to tear this apart in order to try and work out a way that it's not correct, which is perfect. I love people playing devil's advocate in a lot of ways. It challenges me to be better at my job, so that's great. But we had no challenges whatsoever. So much so that we didn't actually make it to court. After a 3-year case, it cost £7 million, about 8.2 million euros, something like that. The case moved to settlement in 3 weeks. And the ultimate settlement was around about 11 million euros. So an incredible project, not just from there's a couple of things that we need, really. One is validation. And the Legal Design Summit, as JP mentioned, was phenomenal for that. We are on the right path. The reason I span out Resol-VR was because of the impact that we had with this case, not just the fast resolution in weeks from a case that was taking years, but we also heard from the judge that he would have loved to see the visualization in court, which for us was really cool. Very
Did he see
industry.
it eventually?
I don't know. We were mainly in contact with the forensic investigator who was leading the case on behalf of the solicitors and things like that.
It's like, I would be so curious to see it at some point. I think it's online right now. People can see it. The recording from the summit, right?
Yeah, we did a recording from the summit. We also have case studies on both the Resol-VR website and the Spearhead Interactive website too.
So you can also see it now and not die out of curiosity.
Yeah, we also have a news post as well where it was actually featured on the BBC
great.
A number of years ago as well. So yeah, that was kind of our kicker. But the really interesting thing as well, we heard back from the criminal team as well. They believe if our visualization had been available to them at that point, then the outcome of the criminal case may well have been different. So the fact that we can provide either a snapshot in time or an actual timeline of events based on what actually happened. So at the moment, we visualized the data and the functionality that we needed to for this particular case, but going forwards and leveraging the technology, there's no problem in having multiple people inside of the environment to move around, integrating content. So, for example, we could have the video feeds from the CCTV cameras linked to the CCTV cameras so that you could view that data, putting hotspots on different areas for evidence marking or whatever. So one investigator goes in, lays out his thoughts, another one can come in, review that, all of these different things. One of the other ideas that we've had recently is how we can leverage this potentially through sanitized environments. So if we do the cases, we then sanitize them. And we can either use that for legal training to allow people to experience different cases and get some experience within those, particularly legal students. But also potentially for maybe high-profile public cases as well. There's often a lot of big cases that are going on in the world that people have a lot of interest in. We could potentially crowdsource investigations. We could provide access to the environments and to the evidence and to the what happened, and let the general public move around and hopefully provide some advice and some guidance to the law enforcement agencies or the people that are involved in that case too. So there's a lot of potential to link in content from different sources, provide different levels of functionality to meet different objectives, and also expose it to a wider audience of people, which then obviously introduces people more into the justice system, makes justice more accessible for a lot of people as well.
Yes.
Which again is the ultimate goal. How can we make things more efficient, more productive, save time, save cost, differentiate, but also more than that, provide a duty of care to people and help resolve cases faster in order to reduce the amount of emotional trauma or whatever it is that particularly from a family of a deceased driver. The interesting thing, and the final point that I'll make on that, is that being able to see and be the driver in that vehicle and knowing that was technically the last thing that guy ever saw is probably the most profound experience that I'm going to ever have in terms of visualization, whether it's PC, VR, or anything like that. So we've been fortunate enough to work with some amazing companies on some amazing projects. We've worked with the Muppets on Sesame Street and all sorts of things like that. So this technology is great for the gaming and for the engagement and for the smiles that we make people have. Yeah. But it's got some really serious real-world implications as well. And it's about understanding how we can work together and leverage that with our clients. Again, not being a lawyer or anything like that, but understanding the challenges that people are facing and designing the right solution for the right job and deploying that in the right way for the right audience as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the main catchphrases I'm getting here is the visualization and how important it is to deciding cases. Because as you mentioned, once people visualized and even more than that and experienced the case, it completely shifts. Not even the decision of the judge, but the entire case itself. It went from civil court to agreement. So the parties had a settlement, and because they visualize the data differently. And this is something that we see here with our resident companies, with Vida and legal design, with Justiça and BI and legal data visualization. It is so different once that you can literally see the information put out differently. Because one of the things that I find amazing about this case that Resol-VR had is that you could have read like dozens of reports and different witness statements and expert statements and a bunch of just paperwork, and it wouldn't have the same impact or effect, or maybe it would take much longer for people to actually come to the same conclusion. So the power of visualization,
people might interpret the data in a different way to actually what happened. So for us, we see the world in 3D. We navigate, we communicate in 3D, all of these kinds of things just as a natural day-to-day lives and living. So I think the only reason that we've not provided data in context is kind of, I guess, the way of doing that is because we've not had the bandwidth or the processing power to do it until now. But a lot of these people and a lot of these conversations that we're having now, it's like, oh, this technology is 5-10 years away. And it's not. It's 5-10 years ago. and now it's a kind of, people are kind of catching up and things like that. Yes. So 90% of what I do is still education in the markets. And then the other 10% is what I really love, and that's solving problems and trying to have an impact and make society a better place.
I'm following your point. It's interesting that this is legal design, because when we work on legal design and we make accessible documents, accessible contracts, it's the same like this. We are making accessible. That's why the resolution of the judge can change, because it's when you are a human, we are an individual that can see and can understand a document that always is in a huge words, and you can see in one page something. Oh, it's great. This is the same. So
this is true access to justice.
Yes, exactly. And we moved the business to the Netherlands in 2020 as well. So we have the UK operations as well, but I sometimes describe myself as a Brexit refugee. I moved from the UK. I now live in the Netherlands since December 2020. I live in Delft, an amazing, beautiful town in the Netherlands. We're about 10 minutes away from The Hague. So why legal? Why such a niche kind of industry rather than doing the low-hanging fruit like, I don't know, the healthcare side of things, where VR and all these things are already very prominent.
Because we are developing two arbitration chambers, virtual environments, and virtual courtrooms. So our next steps is start to work on this to make some prototypes. Arbitration chambers, I think, is very important. We were in contact here with some law firms in Brazil, and they said that it would be amazing that perhaps the next step of Zoom is stay in an arbitration room in a virtual environment, in an immersive environment. So we are going to work on this.
I know that we have a bunch of skeptical arbitration practitioners when it comes to virtual arbitration rooms. So can you explain how it would work? And I feel like the main question for people in the dispute resolution field, and myself included, is one of the things that we find very important as lawyers is to see people's faces and how they gesticulate and act and gesture. And so wouldn't people miss out on those if we're talking virtual space? How can we represent those adequately so that, I mean, at times you see that a person is sort of lying or that you can catch them into not necessarily a lie, but a confusion, and that type of body language that is so important, particularly for audiences.
You're right. Yes, it's great. Yes, we are working on this. I think that for me, the future is hologram.
Okay, okay. We're getting there.
But lights here. So we are with Dan talking about this. Have some brainstorming about how we are going to implement this.
Okay.
For us, it's very important, body language and face language. So
I mean, it's not like legal hasn't go through adaptations with it, because after the pandemic, and I mean, in international arbitration, it's very common for you to have people in not virtual reality, but just digital rooms. So we will use any of the platforms to just meet online, but then you still have the person's face. I see challenges that would be solved by a virtual room. So one of the problems that I used to have when I worked as a case manager for the KMC-CBC Arbitral Institution was that we had to explain, particularly to witnesses or parties that weren't lawyers, how to behave, where to be. For instance, you have to be in an empty room with no other people around you to guide you or tell you what to say. You cannot read documents. And maybe some of those issues would be either simplified or made more complex in the virtual room.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you can start solving the issues that we already have, that might be a great path for solving those, especially if we think that meeting in person for those types of dispute resolution is very impractical. I mean, traveling from China to Germany and from Brazil to meet all up there just so we have like a neutral court and no one has to travel this much, it's awful. So if we can meet online and just imitate what the real experience feels like, that would be amazing. It would spare us so many hours and our carbon footprint would just reduce. I mean, green pledge arbitration, this is the future.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's great to be in Brazil. I'm not going to say no to a flight and coming over here and getting a bit of sunshine, especially from the Netherlands. If you can imagine it, we can build it. That's typically the way that we kind of approach everything. The way that we develop amazing software is not by adding things, it's by constraining things. So I need to have more conversations with people like yourself and with JP and other arbitrators in order to understand, again, what the challenges that you're facing, what is going to be valuable to you. Because I can build anything inside of the environment, I need to lock things down and I need to constrain them specifically to things that are going to provide value. So if we're looking at things like how do we do gestures and body language in there, yes, we can put a video feed and we can put you with a green screen and we can have you as a hologram, or we can do all sorts of different things. There's lots of, I mean, the Kinect sensor from Microsoft is what, 15 years old now or something like that, and that was full depth tracking and body motion tracking. Incredible stuff. The way we are now, it's massively enhanced in terms of the way you could do things. So whether or not it's a combination, we could do a 3D environment with avatars and you can choose yourself, but you also have your video feeds down the side. Or it could be that you're an avatar with just your neck forward and then here's your video feed. So there's plenty of different ways. And we can also use potential hand tracking systems as well. So your avatar will move their hands based on the way it would do it in the real world. So the main, I guess, focus of design at the moment for the arbitration rooms is what's the environment going to look like, how are we going to represent the people, and then also what kind of communication systems are we putting in place.
Okay.
So I want there to be voice over IP, obviously, so we can actually have a conversation, but I would love there to be some AI transcripting, so you don't have to write anything up at the end of it, and also full video recording.
A lot of case managers would be very happy to hear that.
Fantastic. That's what I like to do. And then also linking in a content management system, whether it's a bespoke one that we provide with APIs to existing, or through APIs to existing content management systems that house all the documents relative to the case. I'd love to be able to have an interactive whiteboard that everybody can see, or if you want to present a document to me, you choose the document, it appears for both of us, and we can highlight different areas and again, communicate, collaborate on the document in real time and do things that we can't do in the real world, or that, again, take a lot of time to I've got to do my bit, then I show you your bit, and vice versa, and back and forth. How can we look at that process, leverage technology to improve that in different ways?
And it can even completely transform the way we do hearings nowadays, because if you think that we can record the entire meeting in 3D and then later on you can just sit down, chill out with your cup of coffee and analyze everybody's reactions to every single bit of it, it would just give you so much depth and new information about, well, were the tribunal actually hearing to what I was saying in this bit? Were they impacted by my arguments? How did the counterparty react? Well, I was looking at them at that point, but I didn't see how the counterparty reacted. So it would be interesting to know if they were surprised when I mentioned this or that fact or this or that argument.
Yeah.
So I can actually imagine ways in which, if we don't necessarily even solve the problems that we have, we can just shift and transform the way we already do things into an even more interesting form of dispute resolution.
And I think JP is going to touch on it in a minute, but if we take the same functionality, tweak it a little bit based on the roles of different people, but we change the environment from an arbitration room into a courtroom. We've now got the ability for initially students to practice being prosecution, practice being defense, practice being judges, and run mock trials that ultimately give them the skills and the confidence to act and improve themselves in the real world. And obviously, again, coming from as a non-lawyer perspective, ultimately the idea would be initially using it for training, to prove the value to the markets and to start to familiarize people with the technologies, whilst the arbitration rooms are hopefully providing some value. And with us being based near The Hague, obviously there's a lot of, and just before I move on to that, so obviously the US has adopted Zoom for a lot of their trials and courtrooms, particularly within COVID, in order to move things forward. And I think that Europe has a lot of the same.
Brazil went with Zoom in various areas as well.
Great. So we would hope that once the value is proven from a student perspective, that we would be able to potentially start to leverage this for actual cases. So we can run real trials in virtual courtrooms and again, free up physical spaces for whatever else we would need to do. So for example, living 10 minutes away from The Hague to do a virtual replica of the International Criminal Courts. Unfortunately, with the things that are going on in the world, so Russia, Israel, and all of these things, we expect that The Hague is going to be quite busy in the next 10 years or so. So whilst we can start to develop these things now, prove the value, and maybe, again, provide some value to organizations going forwards.
That's funny that you mentioned. We're having this lecture at a mock trial room at a university tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So you have the opportunity to explain to them what a virtual version of that can look like and how they can leverage it into use. And I was talking to a professor friend of mine that teaches constitutional law, who's like, how can I tie up this virtual reality courtroom with constitutional law? How do they link? And I said, well, your mind limits you a bit, so you just have to think a little bit outside of the box and you'll find many uses to it. Yeah. And one of them was exactly that, access to justice through the virtual environment. So nowadays, people would have to either go to a courtroom or have a computer to log in the virtual space that we have. And I said, well, imagine if instead going to a courtroom from a different city or a faraway state, which is the case of Brazil. I mean, we're larger than so many countries. Yeah. And so, like, imagine going from São Paulo to Rio Grande do Norte. It would be such a hassle, but instead of doing that, you can have like the virtual room space where you can log in from this courtroom into another courtroom, and then you've just made justice so much more accessible to people. And that's the goal and some of the principles we have on the Brazilian constitutional law. And to see that there are people thinking about this kind of stuff and this type of solution, it is so great. But JP, do you have anything else to mention on the courtrooms or any other like new projects that we haven't touched upon?
Yes, we are developing some new products too. For one of these is like we want to train human rights forces that works on countries on human rights. So special forces or peace forces.
Yes.
We want to approach United Nations. We are in contact with some people there to develop human rights training for the peacemakers, for the forces of peace. So for us, training police forces is a possibility too. And then we want to work in training on universities. We want to develop these chambers, perhaps the virtual arbitrations are courtrooms, and the students can use it to make trainings, how to reach the court, how to work and how to manage the case, something like this. So we are approaching some universities to make some contracts with them, to make partnerships, to start with these programs.
And those would be like so awesome because you don't have to just role play with your own university colleagues. You can actually role play with people from India and Amsterdam and Africa. And so it would be just so amazing if we could leverage that experience, and it would make law students so much more global. And like the entire police force training, it is so necessary but so difficult to do, and the experience, it's hard to replicate. So I can see a lot of uses for that with Resol-VR or whatever new spin-off that you come with, because I see that you are addicted to creating new solutions in companies, and it's great. We need creative people doing that.
The way I like it, everything in life is a process, from putting your socks on in the morning to brain surgery, and every process generates data. So one of the biggest Spearhead has no investors. We have no external financing. Everything we've done in the last 11 years has been entirely through commercial revenue alone. And I think a lot of the challenge with that is the fact that the technologies that we're using are quite new, even if the impacts that we're having are quite dramatic. And also the fact that we're a service company that, according to some people, has no focus. So that's why we're developing the spin-out satellite startups, to allow specific sectors to engage with Spearhead and their expertise that we've got that goes back 15, 20 years. We're not an animation company that's moved into the immersive technology space. We're not a marketing agency that's doing these things. Everything I've done in the last almost 20 years of my life is all about how we can solve commercial business challenges for companies through processes and data to improve the various metrics that they want to have improved.
I must confess that from a marketing perspective and communications perspective, it is very important for you to have a focus, even if you have to do that under so many different names.
Yeah.
Because then it's easier to find you, easier to understand what you're doing. It's if you say, I can do whatever.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I
then it
understand.
just makes our work so much harder, right?
But you can get around that a little bit, again, by visualizing processes and data. Once you start mentioning that, and then some of the results and the case studies that we've had, tell me about what you do. And then you can kind of put yourself in their shoes. Having done so much work, we can kind of explore a little bit about, we did this, and it's kind of relevant to some of the things that you're doing, and see where we can go from there.
When you see graphically, for example, if I had his business card, it's easy because he has the three branch there and Spearhead logo there. So he can say, I'm this, but I have developed this. So it's more easy. It's like always visual. It's perfectly. The last thing I want to say is like, we are looking for investors.
We don't have them,
we don't
but
have them,
feel
but
free to join and be one.
Yes, because we are a startup, as I said, Spearhead runs on contracts and managing, not as investors, but we as a startup, we are looking for partners for develop these projects, to make the prototypes. And partnerships for us is very, very important. Universities, law firms, and then investors, of course, you can talk with me.
Speed and scale. That's what we need right now.
Great stuff, and hopefully you'll find so many after this podcast episode. It has been such a pleasure hosting you here today. It was so nice listening more about visualization, data visualization, virtual worlds, and Resol-VR. Thank you so much, Dan and JP, for joining us today.
We're incredibly grateful for the opportunity.
You're always welcome to come back. If you're ever in Brazil, just let us know, and we'll have another chat about new, interesting cases that you've been doing. Aos nossos ouvintes, muito obrigada por participarem de mais um episódio e continuem ligados para as próximas edições.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.